Chapter 1226, Handing Out Mushrooms. Emlyn maintained his smile and calmed himself down before responding.
I can find helpers of a sufficient level.
He didn't wish to borrow the forces of the Sanguine too much on this matter, because if that happened, he would undoubtedly end up as a liaison, a bystander, and a messenger. He would not have any say in the eventual distribution of the spoils of war. As for the Sanguine dukes and marquises, they had no lack of direct descendants who wished to advance to become a demigod and become an earl. At the very beginning, Emlyn believed in his identity as the Sanguine's savior. He believed that the important figures would treat every single member fairly. However, as the Hanged Man analyzed the various high-level Sanguine orders from Marquis Nibs and the other high-level Sanguine, Emlyn gradually became wary of them. He frowned slightly and said,
Sherlock Moriarty?
Emlyn was puzzled as he shifted in his seat.
Why do you think it's him?
If it was in the past, he would have directly said, "Why are you mentioning Sherlock Moriarty? He has been away from Backland for nearly 2 years." But now, he could acutely grasp that there was some hidden information in Marek's words. He subconsciously adjusted his question.
In the eyes of this wraith, Sherlock Moriarty isn't simple. Yes, indeed, he isn't simple.
As he spoke, Emlyn made a guess. Upon hearing Emlyn's question, Marek's expression immediately turned odd, as though it was his first time meeting this Sanguine Viscount. He quickly restrained the abnormality on the surface and said without emotion,
"We need to consider it. I hope you can come up with a more convincing plan the next time we meet."
No problem.
Emlyn secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately stood up and bowed gentlemanly. After deciding on the means of communication, he put on his silk hat and walked out of the room. As he returned to his residence, Emlyn couldn't help but run through his initial plan.
As long as I complete a cooperative agreement with the demigod of the Rose School of Thought's Temperance faction, I can use it to apply for a Grade 1 sealed artifact from the marquises and dukes of the race. Using the reason that it's under the cooperating partners' behest that they object to having demigods of the race be involved, I can stop them from directly interfering. Yes, in order to make an agreement I have to show enough strength to convince Marek and the others. I can only commission the mission at the Tarot Club to see if Ma'am Hermit, Miss Justice, and Mr. Hanged Man are willing to accept the commission. Miss Magician can also be considered. She can summon the projection of Gairman Sparrow. The biggest problem now is that I can't provide enough compensation. I can only try to make an advance or a promise. Once I become an earl, I'll return the payment one by one.
With this in mind, Emlyn suddenly felt thankful that he had joined the Tarot Club. This was the only organization he knew that could use a future promise to exchange for current material goods. And within the Sanguine or in the Orthodox churches, one had to accumulate enough contributions until one reached the end of the line where the characteristics and advancement ritual was awarded. Sometimes, a Beyonder might not be able to accumulate enough contributions in their entire lives.
This is like a credit loan underwritten by Mr. Fool. It can be used to issue missions, and when the advancement succeeds, it can be paid in installments.
Emlyn habitually leaned towards the things he was familiar with. Although he had never borrowed money from the bank, some of the Sanguine had rich experience in such areas and would often talk within their own circles. Most of them had a fixed, expensive hobby. The precious items might not be liquidated easily at times, so they had no choice but to borrow money from close friends or the bank to ensure the necessary cash flow. Emlyn remembered that there was a Sanguine who wasn't good at wealth management. He relied solely on his profession as a doctor to earn money. When he took a fancy to a precious piece of art, he bought it using a loan from the Backland Bank. After that, he couldn't bear to pledge his property up for the mortgage. Exploiting his long life, he spent 200 years repaying the debt. Of course, in name, his father had died, and the son took over the debt. When the son died, the grandson took over the debt. Emlyn's evaluation of this was very honest. North Borough in Backland, outside St. Samuel Cathedral. The citizens lined up in rows as they received the grilled bread, dried mushrooms, preserved fruits, and other food from the workers of the Low and Poverty Relief Foundation. Their lines extended from the main entrance of the cathedral all the way to the square and circled it several times. At a glance, it was densely packed with people. Audrey stood on the steps behind Melissa and took in everything. She saw the pale faces of the citizens, their eyes filled with longing. Seeing a mother holding a baby in her arms, she anxiously coaxed the child while eagerly observing the line in front of her that didn't seem to shorten. She saw many people dressed in bright clothes, formal suits, and long skirts. Some of them pressed down their hats and wore veils, as if they didn't want the people around them to recognize them. At times, some people didn't want to keep order and were dragged out by the priests and policemen who were helping to maintain the order. They were thrown to the back of the lines. As food was delivered, the cloth bags piled behind the long table slowly dwindled until there was none. Finally, all the food had been distributed, but the long line had only been reduced by half. The citizens who were unable to receive the help couldn't resist revealing their disappointment, frustration, and reluctance. However, they didn't make a scene or argue. They moved their feet mechanically towards other handout points. They had experienced this many times in the past 1 or 2 months. They had long known that unnecessary emotions would only waste the energy they had little of. It would hamper their quick movements to other relief points or fair-price food outlets. At this moment, their expressions were numb, their eyes vacant as they left the square like a bunch of zombies. During this process, a woman carrying a child had her legs give way as she fell to the ground. Her child started wailing loudly, his voice laced with pain. As he cried, the child sobbed and said,
"Mommy, I'm so hungry."
There'll be food soon. There'll be food soon. There's food at Memorial Square.
The woman carried the child and patted his back. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. Upon seeing this scene, Audrey was just about to say something when she saw Melissa take out a plate of food from a wooden crate under a long table and run towards the mother and son.
I didn't see it just now. There's still one more.
Melissa crouched down and handed the bread, dried mushrooms, and preserved fruit over. Then she explained in a soft voice, afraid that it would cause a dispute among the citizens. The rest of the food was actually prepared for the foundation staff, who had been busy all this while. The portion that Melissa had given them was hers. The woman took the food and handed it to the child, as she said repeatedly,
Thank you, thank you.
The child hugged the food tightly and mimicked his mother in his nascent voice.
"Thank you, thank you."
Audrey subconsciously looked around and noticed that the church's priests, most of the police, as well as the nighthawks who were mixed among the people to secretly prevent any accidents, were all showing sympathy, pity, and sadness. After the citizens had left, Audrey picked up her own set of food and handed it to Melissa.
You deserve it.
Melissa looked at Miss Hall before her and shook her head.
I gave my own share. Miss Hall, don't worry. I'll have food when I get home. My brother is a civil servant.
With a faint smile, Audrey stuffed the grilled bread, dried mushrooms, and preserved fruits into Melissa's hands.
You don't have to worry about me. My family has prepared snacks for me when I'm out busying myself.
As she spoke, she took a wooden box from her personal maidservant, Annie, and opened it for Melissa to see. The wooden box contained exquisite cucumber sandwiches, cream muffins, and a small carrot cake. A look of astonishment appeared on Melissa's face. She stared at the snacks for a few seconds before looking up at Miss Audrey Hall. She immediately lowered her head and, without saying a word, she ate the grilled bread and water that St. Samuel Cathedral had prepared. As if petrified by her gaze, Audrey held the wooden box and stood rooted to the ground. For a few seconds she didn't move and only pursed her lips tightly. After the 5th batch of residents from Moon City received cleansing and treatment and enjoyed the magical mushrooms, this ancient city became a believer of the Fool without any resistance. It welcomed the saint and oracle, Gehrman Sparrow, into the city. With that, Klein held a large mass and used the unshadowed crucifix and the life's cane to heal the remaining Moon City residents. High Priest Nim, who had finished his quarantine, came out and respectfully asked at the end of the Mass,
Oracle, what is the complete honorific name of the mighty Lord?
Klein looked around and said solemnly with his face tightened,
The Fool that doesn't belong to this era.
After giving out the honorific name, he specially emphasized,
Don't chant the complete honorific name in normal times. Do so only when important matters arise.
Otherwise, as Mr. Fool, he would suffer a mental breakdown from all the phone calls from work. Nim wasn't surprised at all, because the ancient sun god was the same. After some thought, he asked,
What are the requirements for the ritual of the Lord?
Klein said, confidently like a charlatan.
God says, 8th commandment, serve me with your heart, not with your offerings. The most important thing for a ritual is to be pious. There are no other requirements. It can be very simple. Jurel, after all, the Lord does not care.
After saying that, Klein silently added in his heart. After explaining this, he raised his right hand and pointed at the pile of mushrooms in front of him.
The Lord has bestowed these mushrooms to you because He wants you to enjoy a bumper harvest. These mushrooms are nourished by the flesh and blood of monsters. They can rapidly grow and accumulate all the toxins, corruption, and madness into those pure black mushrooms. This can be used as a medium for curses or to smear the heads of arrows.
The Moon City residents listened in excitement as they clasped their hands and bowed their heads, shouting,
Praise be to the Fool.
At that moment, it was as if Klein could hear countless illusory voices coming from the air. They were mixed with the real praises, circling him and anchoring him. Chapter 1227. Summoning Ritual. After Mass, Klein followed the newly appointed priest of the Fool, Nim, into the Black Tower. With no reservations, Nim gave a detailed description of how many demigods and Grade 1 sealed artifacts there were in Moon City.
3 demigods, 5 Grade 1 sealed artifacts. Moon City isn't weak at all. As expected of a power that can directly receive a revelation and guard the border. Furthermore, they had people relatively well distributed across the 22 Beyonder pathways in the beginning. They could work together effectively so that some rituals didn't need any requests for external help or become restricted by the environment. Yes, compared to the City of Silver in how their surroundings is worse and how they do not have Grade 0 sealed artifacts to support them, it's already extraordinary for them to survive to this day. If it wasn't because they couldn't find suitable food, they should be able to survive in the darkness for centuries.
Klein felt wistful after hearing the introduction. At this moment, Nim said respectfully,
Oracle, we are willing to sacrifice all the sealed artifacts and Beyonder characteristics to the Lord. I wonder which one of them will be more pleasing to Him.
This high priest had previously mentioned that apart from him, a night watcher, Moon City also had an iron-blooded knight and an imperative mage. They were respectively the lightning priest and night priest. As for the 5 Grade 1 sealed artifacts, one of them belonged to the monster pathway. It seemed to be a portion of Misfortune Mage characteristic, mixed with a little of a Chaos Walker's characteristic. One of them came from Puppet from the Mutant pathway, and the other was bestowed by Red Angel Medici. It allowed everyone to gather all their powers together. One of them was suspected to be the amalgamation of a Bizarro Sorcerer's characteristic, and there was one of an unknown pathway. It had extremely strong discernment abilities, but it was rather dangerous due to an unknown corruption. Hearing that, Klein's eyelids twitched as he smiled.
Serve the Lord with your heart, not with your offerings. Amialan Jaktadi. The Lord accommodates the entire world and doesn't care about these things.
Having said that, he paused and said,
Of course, if you don't mind, you can bring me around for a tour to broaden my horizons.
Nim answered without hesitation.
No problem.
He originally imagined that Gehrman Sparrow would take away a Grade 1 sealed artifact while taking the tour, but to his surprise, the Oracle only wanted to get a better understanding of the specific situation and had no intention of reaping any benefits. He picked up every sealed artifact to take a look but put them back in the end. No way. After the tour ended, Klein said to the 3 demigod priests,
The opportunity to leave this cursed land isn't here yet. You need to hold on for a while longer. And I will continue my journey to find other survivors and spread the light of the Lord.
Nim and the other priests replied without any hesitation.
Yes, Oracle.
With those mushrooms, they would be spared from annihilation for at least another 3 generations. After settling the matters in Moon City, Klein walked out into the darkness in his trench coat and top hat. What he was going to do next was very clear.
Find dark demonic wolf Kotar and hunt for this god of wishes. My wish is to obtain the miracle invoker's beyonder characteristic and that curtain. I wonder if he will be able to help me achieve it.
As Klein walked, he made a mockery in his heart. With him out of sight of Moon City's residents, he pulled another him out of the fog of history. His main body entered the historical void, causing his consciousness to shift to the projection. This projection also summoned the historical projection of the Staff of the Stars. With its beyonder powers, he descended directly into the place in his mind, the completely destroyed northern ancient city, Noi. After successfully reaching his destination, the projection quickly disappeared, and Klein's body returned to the wilderness outside Moon City. Following that, he summoned the Staff of the Stars' projection and repeated the process, allowing him to instantly reach the Noi ruins. The main purpose of the historical void's projection was to scout ahead and ensure that the scenes that surfaced in his mind were identical to the real world without having any discrepancies. This prevented the Staff of the Stars from creating its random effects. This was the cautiousness of a scholar of yore. In the middle of the quiet and dark training grounds of the City of Silver, Cullen Iliad, who was carrying 2 swords on his back, stood by the side. He watched as Derek Berg set up the ritual and prayed to Mr. Fool, asking him to send a Holy Spirit down upon him to provide him with help. This was different from a normal summoning ritual. The corresponding incantation was more complicated.
The Great Fool, you are the ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray for your loving grace. I pray for your notice. I pray for the power of concealment and change. I summon in the name of the Great Fool, the Holy Spirit that sees through everything, the loving grace of the king of yellow and black, the traveler from the dream and mind.
As the Jotun words echoed at the altar, the flames at the tip of the candle suddenly expanded, forming an illusory door covered in mysterious patterns. The door slowly opened, and a woman wearing a pure white dress and silver mask walked out. She stepped out of the void and walked across the ground. Her hair was red and her eyes were golden. They were limpid and deep, as if they could see through everyone's hearts. This was Justice Audrey. She had used lie to change her height and a mask to conceal her main features. She came to the forsaken land of the gods, the City of Silver, in the form of a spirit body. In fact, the summoning ritual wasn't complicated at all. Klein had pulled Audrey's spirit above the gray fog ahead of time. He waited for the door of summoning to be established before helping her open it, allowing her to pass through and settle the entire matter. That also meant that the description of Holy Spirit that sees through everything could equally have changed to Sleeping Princess, the holder of the golden apple, the previous owner of the crystal slippers, and Justice Audrey would still be able to descend. This was dependent on who Klein allowed to pass through the door of summoning. After all, the key point of the ritual was to use the Fool's name for the summoning, and using the power of Sapphira Castle to communicate with the forsaken land of the gods. The silver-masked Audrey secretly surveyed her surroundings. She sized up the lightning-lit sky, the darkness that spelled lurking danger, and the City of Silver's chief, Cullen Iliad. She then looked away and nodded at Little Sun.
We can begin.
As she spoke, she couldn't help but sigh at his height. Although this could be seen during the tarot gathering, it was still something that left her in a daze when she met him in real life. She remembered very clearly that the son was a few years younger than her. According to Lowen's standards, he was definitely still underage. To her surprise, he was more than 2 meters tall. This made Audrey, who had used lie to deliberately increase her height, still have to look up. Without any hesitation, Derek relaxed his mind and cast his gaze at the golden potion placed on the altar. Gradually, he felt a little dazed as scenes involuntarily flashed across his mind. Scenes of his parents who remained alive inside the coffin. The silver sword that stabbed down hard. The blood that splattered and blinded his eyes momentarily. Haste Manai. It was the heartwarming scenes of his family in the past. Bishak. It was the City of Silver that was on the verge of collapse in the darkness. They were teammates who supported each other and watched each other's backs. It was the elders standing in front of everyone, blocking the storm. It was the repeated curses, the hope he saw in the lightning amidst the darkness. It was a dream that had existed for more than 2,000 years. It was something that generations of people yearned for daily. The emotions that Derek was most unwilling to give up were very complicated. It contained his anger towards reality, the fondness of the past, the pain of his circumstances, the repression of history, and the desire to save the City of Silver. Audrey slowly separated these emotions, as though she had experienced the despair and sadness of the City of Silver, experiencing their unity and sacrifices. Her golden eyes sometimes turned gloomy and heavy, while there were glints at other times, as if she had grabbed something and taken it in. Yet she still remained lost. After a while, she saw the 12 white-winged angel of light. This was another response from Mr. Fool to the sun. Audrey seized the opportunity and attached all the intense feelings onto the angel phantom, preventing them from disappearing or undergoing a resurgence for a short period of time. By doing so, they didn't stay completely separate from Derek's body.
It's done.
She didn't open her mouth, but instead allowed her voice to echo in his heart. At this moment, Derek's eyes became abnormally cold, as if he no longer knew what joy, sadness, pain, and depression were. He picked up the golden potion in front of him and poured it into his mouth. This was a demigod potion obtained from shattering the unshadowed crucifix. The sealed artifact that originated from the ancient sun god no longer existed. Of course, for Klein, anything he once possessed remained as enduring as the universe. A hot, violent liquid gushed down Derek's throat, instantly filling his entire body and occupying his soul. Rays of bright sunlight burst out from his body, washing away the remnants of his body's corruption and the heaviness of his soul. Derek's body became purer and clearer, like a Holy Spirit formed from pure light. His self-awareness and emotions were being purified and repelled. It wouldn't take long for him to only have the instinct to praise the sun. At this moment, Audrey no longer let the strong emotions that she had stripped from him remain attached to the angel projection. She guided them back towards Little Sun. One scene after another surfaced in Derek's mind, causing him to experience abnormally complicated emotions. He once again experienced the pain of personally killing his parents, the despair brought about by the circumstances of the City of Silver, and the joy of receiving Mr. Fool's loving grace. This drilled deep into him, becoming a foundation of his mind world. It was very sturdy and very reliable, allowing him to withstand the last few rounds of the potion's cleansing forces. Finally, Derek opened his eyes. It was pure white. When he saw a ray of light in front of him, he instinctively extended his right hand in an attempt to grab it. However, the light quickly dimmed and extinguished. Derek was stunned for a moment before he clenched his right hand tightly. Beams of light rose up and enveloped the entire City of Silver. The legendary noon descended for a brief moment. All the residents of the City of Silver were stunned by what they saw. This was even more shocking than any of the previous demigods. Advancement. Sunlight. It was sunlight that illuminated the entire city. After ending the summoning, Audrey returned above the gray fog. At that moment, Mr. Fool was no longer around. The ancient palace only had the world Gehrman Sparrow, who had planned on observing the ritual, Klein asked.
You don't seem to be in a good state.
Audrey sat down and smiled.
I'm just a little edgy, hesitant, and confused.
Klein calmly said,
That's very normal. Before truly making up one's mind, everyone would behave like this. There are countless people who retreat and regret their decision.
Audrey didn't directly answer the topic at hand, and instead said with a faint smile,
Ever since I became a spectator, I've always displayed what would be the most acceptable side to them in front of others, taking care of their most delicate emotions. This isn't a bad thing, but this way, I won't be able to know what I really look like in the eyes of others. I won't be able to unveil the gorgeous clothes and see the rotting flesh beneath me. I won't be able to figure out the problem. Recently, I've been trying to show my true state in some details. I want to see how the people around me will react under such a situation. I want to see if they still think that I'm the kind, amiable, and virtuous young lady.
At this point, she suddenly fell silent. A few seconds later, she sighed and said,
The gap.
Chapter 1228, Wishes. Without waiting for the World Gehrman Sparrow to respond, Audrey, who was maintaining her posture, slowly said a few words.
Heaviness. Pain. Shame.
Klein listened silently without commenting on what Miss Justice said. Instead, he asked in a gentle tone that was closer to the image of Duane Dantes,
Why do you suddenly want to do such a test?
It's not a test.
Audrey shook her head.
It's just to reveal the details that I usually hide and avoid. I want to see what I really look like in the eyes of others.
After pausing for a moment, she moved her lips without a smile.
After our previous conversation, I really am trying to come up with a plan. I plan to secretly do some manipulating, so that the nobles, businessmen, royal family, and the church can release enough food from their stockpiles. Theoretically, this is a simple matter, but when actually trying to put it into action, I realize that I can't be as determined and decisive as I thought. Some of them are my uncles and aunts, some of them are my cousins. Some of them are friends I've known since I was young, while others are elders who have been very protective of me. Some of them I often meet with during various charity events and are rather friendly. They formed my childhood and gave me too much. It was a part of my growth, a part of the beautiful memories of my past. Besides, the food they accumulated wasn't stolen. Their explanation is actually reasonable. I really can't do it, to make them my target in an attempt to rob them of a portion of their wealth. At least it's like this now.
As she spoke, Audrey's voice unknowingly escalated into a crescendo, as if she was arguing with someone. She then realized that she had lost her composure and remained silent for 2 seconds before continuing.
That's why I want to know more about myself. I want to strip away the false image from our past relationships. Under different circumstances, I want to ask myself what I really want. Whether my thoughts in the past were impulsive, hypocritical, and naive, or strong beliefs from my heart.
At this point, Audrey suddenly smiled.
Although I haven't come to any conclusions, the attempt has already brought some added benefits. I used to think that I had strictly abided by the principle of, you're only acting, but now I realize that I'm almost addicted to acting. Other pathways require different identities and occupations. The spectator pathway's acting is completely consistent with one's daily life. Sometimes it's hard to clearly differentiate between them. The simplest example: who wouldn't want to be loved by everyone? Hence, when facing different people, I would wear a different mask and use the powers of the spectator pathway to create an image that suits the other party's expectations the best. When there are more and more of such things, when you face everyone, you would actually be obsessed with acting. You would almost lose yourself.
Klein nodded slightly and said,
That's a good lesson.
He didn't comment on Miss Justice's prior words. After a moment of silence, Audrey slowly said,
During this period of time, I've read the Eastborough investigation report that my father hired someone to do. I've experienced many different things. Before the war, many of the poor people, workers, and farmers have lived lives that are as difficult as the lives today. They've been in constant hunger and pain. The changes to the Poor Law and the strict laws about the working hours and environment has indeed brought about some improvement to the management of the pollution in the air, but just a little. After the war ends, and if we overcome the apocalypse, will such things happen again?
As she spoke, Audrey pursed her lips tightly and fell into silence. Klein could sense Miss Justice's confusion and perplexity. After some deliberation, he didn't say the answer in his heart. He said in a deep voice,
These questions of yours, including what you said about your true thoughts, require you to find the answers yourself. No one can replace you. I can only give you some advice. Go to the fields and take a look at the hard-working farmers. Go to the factories and take a look at the diligent workers. Go to the East District and experience them. Go to the library and read through the past newspapers and other related works.
Audrey listened attentively and nodded seriously.
I will try.
She immediately stood up and bowed towards the end of the long, mottled table. Although Mr. Fool had left, she believed that he was watching. Just as she was waiting for Mr. Fool to send her back to the real world, the world suddenly said,
Hold on.
Oh?
Audrey expressed her curiosity with a nasal grunt. Klein looked at her and conjured a piece of paper.
This is the description of a mythical creature's character and behaviors. I hope you can provide me with some help. Based on this analysis, determine what kind of reactions he will carry out in different situations.
All right.
Audrey did not refuse and agreed. After she took the piece of paper and finished reading the content, Klein deliberated and said,
Regarding what you just said, I have another suggestion. There are two types of questions that you have. Some of them are indeed very pressing, while the others are not. You can wait for things to calm down and do a deeper investigation. Well, once a person is anxious, they will easily make mistakes. It's best you be clear about the differences.
Audrey thought for a moment and nodded solemnly.
I understand.
After responding, she suddenly laughed.
I thought you called me at the last moment to give me your blessings, hoping that I will still love this world after seeing the world as it is.
Klein was first taken aback before he asked with a smile.
You seem to have read a lot of Emperor Rozel's novels.
He's an outstanding novelist and also a very complicated and contradictory person.
Audrey said with a faint smile. Klein nodded indiscernibly and spoke slowly.
If I wanted to give you my blessings, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said, I hope that you will still love your family and friends after seeing them as they are.
Audrey was taken aback as her lips quivered, as though she was repeating the words. After a few seconds, she closed her eyes and said with a slightly hoarse voice,
Thank you.
Sonia C. In the waters of the Rørsted archipelago. The Blue Avenger led a pirate fleet through the battlefield that was ravaged by war. Suddenly, a huge fireball flew over from nowhere. Intertwined silver beams split apart the surface of the sea, creating a passageway that didn't originally exist. Surrounded by the massive waves on both sides, it pointed straight at the Blue Avenger. Alger Wilson, who was standing at the bow, raised his right hand without a change in expression when he saw this scene. A violent hurricane suddenly appeared, sweeping up the azure-blue seawater and curling up the silver rays, like a long snake that shot into the sky, colliding with the huge fireball. Boom! The water splashed down like rain. Alger immediately locked onto a battleship, opened his mouth, and let out an angry roar. With a boom, the boat was suddenly lifted into the air by a ferocious wave. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Blue Avenger's cannons automatically fired as a series of salvos echoed continuously. Realizing that the Beyonder on the other party's warship was trying to use the force of the fireball's detonation to allow the ship to drift sideways, Alger suddenly pulled down his right hand. A thick bolt of silver lightning struck down, charring the Beyonder's body as he constantly convulsed. Boom, boom, boom. As artillery shells hit their target, the ship disintegrated in midair. At that instant, Alger felt a little dazed. He couldn't help but look down at his right hand.
This is the power of a cataclysmic inter. Is this how it feels to be a demigod?
He sighed in his heart in a somewhat intoxicated manner, before quickly snapping back to his senses. He got the Blue Avenger to pursue the enemy. An hour later, the intense sea battle was over. Lowen's side had once again secured the Rørsted archipelago. Alger was in a rather good mood. After returning to the port on the Blue Avenger, he called the sailors down and headed for one of the few bars that still remained open for business. Lowen had already issued an alcohol ban during wartime as a way to add to the food rationing efforts, but to sailors, alcohol was indispensable. Therefore, in the area controlled by the Church of the Lord of Storms, the restrictions in this area weren't too strict. Furthermore, the Rørsted archipelago had plenty of produce, and there weren't too many people. The shipping lines were under control, so their food supply hadn't been disrupted. After walking for a distance, Alger's gaze suddenly froze. The street in front of him had been hit, and many houses had already collapsed. One of them had a huge crater in a concrete field, while the four-story building beside it was left in ruins. The smile on Alger's face gradually disappeared. On Monday afternoon, 3:00 p.m. Backlund time, dark red beams of light shot up from both sides of the long bronze table, coagulating into blurry figures. After all the members bowed to Mr. Fool, the gathering's transaction segment began, since there weren't any more Roselle diary pages or accumulated questions. Emlyn immediately sat up straight and surveyed the area.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a commission.
Which shaman king do you wish to hunt?
Catalia asked according to her understanding of Mr. Moon. Emlyn took 2 seconds to digest her question. He maintained his elegant smile and said,
You guessed correctly.
Catalia nodded slightly and said,
What kind of payment can you provide?
Emlyn was once again at a loss for words, a little embarrassed to say what he had prepared to say. At this moment, the world at the bottom end of the long bronze table suddenly said,
You found someone from the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction to cooperate with?
Emlyn heaved a sigh of relief.
That's right.
Then I can take on this commission.
As this was related to Miss Messenger, Miss Sharon, and Merrick, Klein controlled the world to take the initiative to accept the mission.
Of course, this requires a certain medium.
Without waiting for Emlyn to respond, he made Gehrman Sparrow look at Miss Magician.
Make some preparations in advance.
Fours, who had been watching the entire thing play out like a performance, wore a blank look on her face.
Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Chapter 1229, Collective Wisdom. Seeing that Miss Magician had yet to react, Klein made the world add,
You don't need to be there. Just summon my historical projection in advance.
All right.
Fours nodded hurriedly. At that moment, because Gehrman Sparrow had accepted his mission, Emlyn clearly relaxed. From what he knew, this meant that the success rate of the matter had skyrocketed. In the next second, the world looked at him and hoarsely asked,
What kind of payment can you provide?
Emlyn fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, with his eyes darting upwards slightly,
Once I become a Shaman King, I'll provide a free promise on similar matters. Also, I only want the Shaman King's Beyonder characteristic. The members of the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction should have a clear goal. The rest will be yours.
Mr. Moon isn't very stolid. He doesn't have much confidence. Through his actions and words, Audrey came to a conclusion. This fellow Emlyn has learned how to use consumption loans. Klein secretly laughed and made the world indifferently reply,
It looks like you can only afford a demigod like me.
If Mr. Moon can provide a large amount of food, I don't mind participating.
Justice Audrey mumbled inwardly. However, she didn't need to say anything to know what Mr. Moon would say. Why would we sanguine be hoarding so many snacks? To the sanguine, their staple was the blood of humans with abundant spirituality. Bread and meat products were all non-essentials. Seeing that the world Gehrman Sparrow didn't reject his offer, Emlyn secretly heaved a sigh of relief.
What other requests do you have? I'll try my best to fulfill them.
Gehrman Sparrow thought for a moment before saying,
Give me a mystical item or a sealed artifact that can greatly increase the wielder's spirituality for a short period of time.
This was for Miss Magician, allowing her to maintain the historical void projection for a few more minutes. And there was no doubt that the Moon domain had such Beyonder powers. For example, the Scarlet Scholar could create a full moon state, allowing their spirituality to be enhanced.
All right, no problem.
Seeing that the human and vampire had come to an agreement, Fours hurriedly raised her hand and said,
No full moon.
That way, ignoring the enhancement of her spirituality, she would be considered lucky if she didn't die on the spot. After all, the higher the sequence, the clearer one could hear Mr. Door's ravings. Fours had long since advanced from Sequence 6, Scribe, to Sequence 5, Traveler. Emlyn also knew about Miss Magician's full moon curse, so he had no questions about it. He acknowledged tersely, indicating that he had taken note. At this moment, Alger, who was listening to the completed transaction beside him, said in thought,
Although the Beyonders of the Rose School of Thought are easily controlled by their emotions and instincts, this didn't mean that their brains had already disappeared along with their zombification. Even if they're gone, they still have members of the Moon domain. Since their demigods were directly involved in the Southern Continent's war and have exposed their locations, they wouldn't dismiss the possibility of an attack from the Sanguine and Temperance faction. I believe there's a high chance of them laying a trap.
That's right.
Leonard echoed,
Many dossiers indicate that, although the Beyonders of the Rose School of Thought are well known for indulging themselves in bloodshed, cruelty, and desires, they still act very meticulously. Their actions show certain cunningness and sinisterness.
Shio glanced at her friend and said,
I encountered a supernatural incident involving the Rose School of Thought 2 months ago. The target was obviously deceived and fell into a trap.
The World Gearman Sparrow listened attentively before scoffing. He then said to Emlyn,
Which Shaman King is your target?
Emlyn didn't hide anything.
The Shaman King who led the natives from East Balam's North Olite County to attack the Loan's main colonial city.
Upon hearing this, a thought flashed across Klein's mind.
The Mother Tree of Desire doesn't seem to want the goddess to control the uniqueness of the death pathway. She was driving the natives and using the war to waver the fundamental faith of the Church of Evernight in the Southern Continent.
As this thought flashed through his mind, he made the World Gearman Sparrow look at Emlyn and chuckle.
Then my target will be another Shaman King. This has nothing to do with your operation.
There was no need for him to be too direct. Emlyn, Cattleya, and company quickly understood his plan. This was a simple plan. German Sparrow hunted another Shaman King and took the initiative to step into a trap to attract the hidden forces of the Rose School of Thought. And at that moment, the Moon and the Rose School of Thought's Temperance faction would take the opportunity to attack the real target.
Isn't this too dangerous?
Emlyn subconsciously replied, Viridia. The danger was of course directed to Gearman Sparrow, who would be walking into a trap. Amalin Alok. The World Gearman Sparrow replied very calmly,
It will just be a historical projection. If he dies, so be it.
Upon hearing such an answer, Emlyn, Leonard, and the other members of the Tarot Club were at a loss as to what expression to show as a response. It was unknown if they should reflect on the fact that Sequence 3 demigods were different, or be envious that scholars of yore had such beyonder powers. Klein continued to let the world speak.
If the Rose School of Thought has any doubts about my sudden attack, and only divert a portion of their strength to stop me so as to still maintain a relatively complete trap, then I will try to hunt that Shaman King seriously and turn the false target into the true target. After all you want is the corresponding items. You don't care who the original owner is.
A simple but effective plan. The key point is that Gearman Sparrow has to have a strength that exceeds his limits, one that can put up resistance even when facing an angel.
Audrey learned from him seriously and evaluated this inwardly. 1. Emlyn no longer had any doubts. After some thought, he said,
Before the official operation, I need to meet with the members of the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction to finalize the details.
The World Gearman Sparrow nodded and said,
Make arrangements for it.
After the exchange, Klein made the world conjure a paper stack and distributed it to the members of the Tarot Club.
Some existences and I will be dealing with a mythical creature. You can raise your opinion and share your thoughts.
The piece of paper was written with the character and actions of the dark demonic wolf, Kotar, as well as the various analysis Miss Justice had made. He hoped that he could find inspiration through different people with their different personalities and knowledge. Mythical creature. The world has set his sights on mythical creatures? Alger, who had been much quieter than usual, couldn't help but look at the bottom end of the long bronze table. Although he was already mentally prepared for this, he felt that he wouldn't be surprised even if the World Gearman Sparrow suddenly called himself an angel. However, when he realized that the other party was really targeting a mythical creature, he couldn't help but feel a little shocked and perturbed. Cattleya had similar feelings as well, but she immediately recalled the Snake of Fate, the Death Console, and the Ancient Bane. This matched the German Sparrow's words of some existences. It was very normal for 3 angels and a Sequence 3 blessed to hunt a mythical creature. One by one, they retracted their gazes from the bottom end of the long, mottled table, and they began reading the information in their hands seriously. At this moment, as they weren't involved in the commission or involved in a transaction, nor were they sharing information, yet the members of the Tarot Club had a baffling feeling of working together for one common goal. They felt like they were starting to feel like an organization. After reading the contents, Algier was the first to speak.
According to Miss Justice's analysis, no bait will trap that paranoid mythical creature. It will only push him to escape further. Under the situation of him suspected to wield a sequence 1 beyonder characteristic, he really doesn't need to chase after other things. Advancing himself is the most important thing at hand. If you want to deal with him, we can only consider it from this point of view.
Upon hearing this, Gio said from a professional point of view,
"But this mythical creature is very cautious. He doesn't leave any clues behind. And according to the intel, the location he can use to prepare for the Sequence 1 ritual isn't actually restricted in an environment like the Forsaken Land of the Gods."
Yes, there are too many monsters for him to use.
Derek confirmed what Misjudgment had said. There was silence immediately. Leonard thought for a moment and said,
"Can we rely on the law of beyonder characteristics convergence?"
As he spoke, he looked at Klein Moretti.
"That mythical creature seems to be from the same pathway as you."
Just relying on the effect that comes from the convergence of beyonder characteristic at this level, the chance upon this mythical creature might take a year or two, perhaps even longer. Furthermore, the other party is a complete mythical creature. He has the ability to cause some interference.
Klein overruled Leonard's suggestion. Of course, if he augmented the power of Sapphira Castle onto himself, he might be able to meet the dark demonic wolf the next time he used the Staff of the Stars' random teleportation. However, the problem was that if that happened, the chances of a coincidental encounter with Aemon would be much, much higher. This was the standard way of knocking on death's door. Wavi wurai jai. After hearing everyone's discussion, Catalea said in thought, according to what the Queen found taboo,
Can we use this mythical creature's honorific name to establish a connection?
If the dark demonic wolf hadn't been tracked by Aemon in the past, that might have been possible. But now what can be thought must have been thought of by Aemon. Under such circumstances, the fact that the dark demonic wolf hasn't perished implies that he is wary of such matters. The World Gehrman Sparrow slowly shook his head.
With his paranoid character, he definitely wouldn't respond automatically.
Just as he said that, he suddenly had an idea.
Not receiving a response from the dark demonic wolf didn't mean that he wouldn't pay attention to the corresponding prayer light.
Chapter 1230, Meeting Again. As he had personal experience, Klein placed himself in the shoes of the dark demonic wolf and pondered. Usually, he would shut down the automatic prayer response to prevent an enemy from using the feedback to establish a connection and lock onto his position. Under this premise, to receive a sudden prayer from a stranger would no doubt lead to him relying on the corresponding point of light to observe the supplicant and grasp more information. This allowed him to make preparations for what might happen in the future. If the person chanting the honorific name was a powerful existence like Aemon or someone relatively more familiar, it would be best to destroy that point of light immediately. However, if the person was a stranger, under such a situation where he was completely safe, he would monitor him for a long period of time to understand the exact situation and see if there was a need for a counterattack. It was something that every rational creature would most likely do. At the very least, Klein would do so. The essence of this matter was that non-mythical creatures were marked by high-level existences. They could die in a baffling and tragic manner at any moment. To the supplicant, this was equivalent to suicide, or something even more terrifying. To the dark demonic wolf, it was only a positive outcome, nothing negative. At the beginning, the suspicious dark demonic wolf would definitely suspect that there was a conspiracy. He wouldn't dare to establish a connection and influence Klein from a distance. However, with the passage of time, as the observations deepened and a confirmation was made that the other party was a non-angel weakling who possessed the aura of Saphira Castle with signs of being unprepared, he would definitely find an opportunity to attack from afar. At the time when Klein was most unprepared, he would mark the prayer light and deal a remote attack. This aligned with Klein's previous conclusion about his advantage that Klein,
I'm very weak.
The only problem with this plan was that the initiative was completely in the hands of the dark demonic wolf. Everything Klein did would be monitored, and there was no way to prepare ahead of time. Once the other party tried to exert his influence on him, he would not be able to fight back and wouldn't be spared.
Phew. By doing so, I would successfully bait the prey, but kill the hunter as a result. It's meaningless. Yet, if I don't place myself in such a passive position, it will be difficult to bait an angel of the seer pathway, the paranoid demonic wolf. This is something that a marionette or others cannot do in my stead. If only I can be certain that the dark demonic wolf wouldn't rashly attack remotely because of his paranoia and will only choose to monitor and observe.
Thoughts raced through Klein's mind as he sought out the possibilities amongst numerous impossibilities. With regards to this, he could only sigh inwardly, feeling regretful for not being an angel from the spectator pathway. According to his assumptions, the angels of the spectator pathway would more or less have some special characteristics of the more others know about you, the more you understand them. When the dark demonic wolf monitored him closely through prayer light and ended up carefully observing an angel from the spectator pathway, his position would undoubtedly be exposed to the other party.
Unfortunately, I'm not. Besides, the spectator pathway sequence 2 might not be able to do so. I can only be certain that a sequence 1 has this special trait. Summoning 008 from the fog of history? No, let's not talk about whether I can summon that quill without Grizel's travels. Even if I successfully create a projection, the quill is a quill while I am still myself. The dark demonic wolf's understanding of me doesn't make 008 do the reverse. Also, I can only use it for a mere 2 minutes. It wouldn't be enough to sense anything. It can be used as supplementary to the plan, writing the development I wish to see happen, making the dark demonic wolf's choice appear reasonable so as to eliminate uncertain elements.
Klein considered for a long while, but he failed to find a suitable plan to bait his prey. Apart from feeling regretful that he wasn't a Sequence 1 angel of the spectator pathway, he had also thought of the cosmos.
Just learning of it would result in corruption from the cosmos. If I had the nature of the cosmos, then after the dark demonic wolf uses the prayer point of light to monitor me, he would be corrupted, allowing me to lock onto his position. However, the cosmos's nature is higher than that of an angel. How could I have it? I keep feeling like I've forgotten something.
Klein made the world Gehrman Sparrow shake his head indiscernibly as he surveyed the area.
There's no need to discuss the answer now. You can go back and communicate with the right person with suitable methods.
He focused his attention on the star Leonard and the hermit Catalea, hoping that they would be able to get advice from the existences that were more experienced, such as Palez Zoroast and Queen Mystic Bernadette. As for himself, he would return to Backlund with the aid of the historical projection. He would seek advice from Miss Messenger, Will Ossepton, and the ascetic Ariana.
This is what it means to seek the opinions of angels, or quasi-angels, before making a major decision.
Klein made a self-deprecatory comment. When Leonard and Catalea heard that, they nodded in unison.
All right.
Following that, the members of the Tarot Club began discussing the situations of the various battlefields until the end of the gathering. After returning to the real world, Leonard, who was resting in St. Samuel Cathedral's basement, spoke in a low voice, explaining all the questions that Klein had posed to him, and said,
"Old man, do you have any suggestions?"
This is him trying to obtain the miracle invoker beyond her characteristic left behind in the forsaken land of the gods.
Palez Zoroast was first enlightened before he chuckled.
Tell your former colleague that there's no way he can resolve this matter himself. I only have one suggestion. That is to seek help from the fool.
Leonard knew Old Man's character very well. He hurriedly asked,
"Is this really the only suggestion?"
Palez Zoroast harumphed and said,
That's a mythical creature that even Aemon can't capture. It's possible only by relying on the fool's help.
Only then did Leonard nod and sigh.
It seems that's the only way.
2 days later, 2 minutes before the meeting time that the moon Emlyn had agreed to meet Merrick, Fors sat on a reclining chair beside the fireplace and listened to the commotion on the second floor. She cast her gaze at her friend Zio.
If the war continues, Backland will definitely suffer more attacks. Are you really not going to evacuate your mother and brother to the surrounding villages?
Shio's short, light blonde hair was parted in an asymmetrical fashion and was neatly combed. Compared to last year, she looked more serious and had the bearing of an adjudicator. She was like a high-ranking knight leading an order of knights. She hesitantly said,
The population in the surrounding villages has reached its limit. Besides, I can still get enough food from MI9 now.
Having said that, she paused and said,
If the flames of war really reach Backland, take them traveling to Intis and Fainapotter.
It seems that's the only way.
Just as Fors was about to mention the matter of her buying food in Intis a few days ago, she suddenly heard the alarm ring. She shivered and suddenly sat up straight. She stretched out her right hand, which was wearing a red string, and grabbed into the air. Her arms sank as she pulled out Gehrman Sparrow, who was wearing a silk top hat and a black trench coat without glasses. The cold adventurer's eyes rolled and gained consciousness, reducing the amount of spirituality that Miss Magician had to expend. He nodded gently as he made the glove on his left hand become transparent. In less than 1 second, Gehrman Sparrow teleported away and disappeared from Fors and Sio's rented apartment. Fors was stunned for a moment before the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. She turned to Shio and said,
I think I'm just a tool.
The sky was already dark, but the street lamps weren't lit up. Only the crimson moon illuminated the entire city. When Klein arrived at the agreed-upon place, he looked around and saw the unusually cold streets, the burning marks on the walls, and the collapsed buildings not far away for a few seconds. Just based on what he saw, Backland was desolate and dilapidated. It even had the smell of gunpowder wafting through the city. At this moment, Emlyn White walked out of an alley and nodded at the crazy adventurer. According to Gehrman Sparrow's instructions, he didn't say a word or bow. To prevent any delay in whatever precious time Gehrman Sparrow had, he led him to a nearby house and knocked on the door rhythmically. With a creak, the door opened automatically, revealing a dark environment blanketed with faint moonlight. The moment Emlyn and Klein entered, they saw the white shirt and black-vested Merrick sitting on the sofa. The door behind them seemed to have a life of its own as it slammed to a close. After taking a glance at him, Emlyn smiled and pointed at him.
This is my partner, Mr. Gehrman Sparrow.
Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly realized that the way Merrick looked at him was even odder, as though he was examining an idiot.
Long time no see.
Merrick immediately stood up, pressed his hand to his chest, and bowed at Sherlock Moriarty. Since the other party didn't appear in the image of Sherlock Moriarty, he definitely wouldn't take the initiative to mention such matters.
Long time no see.
Klein took off his hat and surveyed the area.
Miss Sharon, please come out for the discussion. I have limited time.
As he spoke, he took out a silver adventurer's harmonica and blew into it. A figure wearing a dark and complicated long dress, holding 4 blonde, red-eyed heads, walked out from the void. The messenger summoned by the harmonica's historical projection was an objective existence. It didn't increase the spirituality burden of Fors. At the same time, Merrick nodded and said,
All right.
He cast his gaze on the high stool on the other side of the room. Emlyn looked at the wraith in a daze, then at Gehrman Sparrow and the spirit world creature he summoned. For some reason, he felt like he had been ostracized and didn't belong here, and on that high stool, a figure quickly outlined itself. Her skin was fair like a doll, and she wore an exquisite black regal dress and a small bonnet of the same color. Her blonde hair and blue eyes were slightly pale in color.